Today on the Idiot's Guide, we're diving into the sparks of innovation, the bolts of impact, the circuits that power the whole world. We're going to talk about one of the most electrifying inventions in history, electricity. I know, it's shocking. Imagine a world without it. No lights, no phones, no memes. Yeah, that's scary. But without electricity, but while electricity has lit up our lives in so many ways, it's also cast a few shadows. So in this episode, we're exploring how the invention of electricity has shaped the world for the better and, not always for the better. Stick with us as we power through some fascinating insights. And as always, we promise a few light bulb moments along the way. And are you ready? Let's plug in. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, aka the Profit Hacker, and I'm joined by the man in charge, Mr. Joe Haslam. Welcome to the Idiot's Guide. So to think about the idea of electricity and how much, it literally has revolutionized pretty much everything. I mean, the only way for us to be able to do what we're doing right now, having the conversation that we are having, is because of electricity. No other reason. Yeah. And to think that it just started with a little spark, So, you think about this, probably one of the main primary things that it originally helped with, obviously light, okay, the light bulb, whatever, but communication. To be able to, communicate across ways, even to be able to generate a signal takes the electricity to be able to generate the signal that broadcasts on a radio wave. Things like that, like telegraphs and the first kind of electric communication networks. I mean, they really set the stage for what our world, our whole globe uses to stay in communication with. Yeah. Even like the earlier stage stuff, you think about it now and you go man, that stuff's archaic. That stuff is, you think of, if you find it, it's usually in an antique shop. Doesn't work at all. It takes the little tube amplifier bulbs. And so my parents had an old wooden radio, and it had the dial in the center to be able to tune in. Yeah. But the amplifier inside had old tubes. This thing was it didn't work. But it had the old thing. The amplifier was probably, I was going to say as big as a VCR, but then that makes me sound old too. but basically bigger than a PlayStation. There you go. Okay. And then these big light bulb looking things, they called them tubes, sticking out the very top of it. And that's still years from original electricity, the invention of electricity. So you think about how central electricity is in our society, from the TV to the radios to internet. And, in between getting set up and that kind of stuff, we're both on our phones looking up information, which is everything credited to the invention of electricity. Yeah. Now, to be fair, the communication that we are giving, so the original podcasters, the original influencers, they didn't come about when we got electricity and YouTube and all that stuff. The original influencers, the original podcasters were storytellers. We've got Shakespeare, the bard. Yeah. They were bards. They were traveling storytellers that got paid for telling their story. Very similar to the YouTube style. The more popular you are, the more money you made. Hence why we still fund everything for ourselves. It's weird how snake oil sales is still out there too. But so the original influencers, they had great influence on
subsequent generations because they shared a story. They shared a principle. We've got stories like Scheherazade because of storytellers. We can go back to the stories of Beowulf, and that was shared by storytellers.
Yeah.
All of these things were created and shared to give a story, going back to even the original philosophers, Socrates and Plato and Cicero. These were the original influencers, but they didn't have the ability to speak to everyone.
Right.
And so they shared that with a small group of people. And then they took that information and they shared that. And then they took the information and they shared that. And if anyone's ever played telephone, you know how bad that gets the further from the original source it goes. And so information that disseminated from that was not always 100% accurate. And so it's one of those things where now with technology, it means that the original story that's being told is the original story that's going out to other people. You can fact check, you can look on your phone, verify, get the information correct, and make sure that is exactly what the person actually said. Now, fake news today, there's a lot of AI images that appear to make it look like babies dancing down the street. And so we have to be careful about that nowadays with some of this AI stuff. But we can still go back to the original information and see that that is actually what happened, which couldn't be done back with the original storytellers. So it gave a lot more credibility to information. It gave a lot more fact checking. It gave a lot more validity to the information that's being shared. And that just changed the world.
Yeah.
Medicine, education, all of that was improved simply because of electricity.
When you move to our modern day context, and you have, our smartphone technology, cloud technology, social media, shaping how we interact, how we communicate with each other, how we consume information, how we negotiate information, how we prepare for whatever we do. I mean, I in between, we were sitting here and I'm sending an email, like I'm a draft. I don't have to draft it, get my scribe out and my quill, and I'm out here flapping the feather. Well, yes, deep. but
I don't know how Shakespeare did it.
Yeah, probably like that. Yeah, I think he was left-handed. So there you go. That's better. I don't know. He's probably not left-handed. But that'd be an interesting fact to find out. But we should look that up on our electronic devices in our phones.
Here we are passing wrong information without fact check.
Look,
fact check for us.
I think just communication alone, the development of a telephone, then to the development of internet. I mean, just this little single power source where we think about the kite to the key, and the whatever, the however they do that, where they talk about harnessing the power and electricity of a lightning bolt.
That's apocryphal.
Okay, anyway.
Benjamin Franklin did not discover electricity by having a key and a kite.
Look, I read the kids' stories, okay? Give me a break.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did zero research for this podcast episode.
Hey, good to know.
So you're going to know more than me, apparently, about the history of the invention of electricity. But the biggest thing is to see it from where it started, this spark of electricity, and what it could become to the immense global phenomenon that it is now. But I think what's interesting is like you said, it impacts so many different areas of our life, from the things, how we work, how we are succeed at our jobs, to medical care, to the things that we enjoy when we're relaxing or, traveling, to how we are educating ourselves. A lot of that's there. So I think that it's something to consider there, to go like, man, look how far it has gone. Now, before we move on, let me ask you this. Has the topic sparked your interest? If it has, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give us a like. It's a small click for you, but a giant leap for our podcast. Thanks for the support. That was really cheesy, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
That's great. Hey, we like and subscribes. That's what we want. And also comment. Sometimes those make it into our as a podcast recommendation. We might be, making it into a series because of something magical that you said about our podcast. Anyway, so something that I think you wanted to bring up in this, and I think that it's a really valid thing because I don't think it gets a lot of credit in what it does, but I tried to look for the modern application of this today, and it's weird because I might be one, is what I recognized. Okay, so historically, there is an element of this back when this whole new thing called electricity was starting to buzz and to start to.
This was before electricity.
Well, okay, but you're killing me, Smalls.
All right, keep going. Sorry, I'll fact check you at the end.
This is about electricity. So even if they existed before that, this is about electricity.
Okay.
So there's a crew of individuals that didn't arrive when electricity arrived, but they were around, and they certainly didn't like electricity. They're called the Luddites. And nowadays, honestly, I don't think they use it nowadays, but it is a term that has been used in our more modern colloquial phrases where you call someone a Luddite. And basically a brief history about they're 19th century English textile workers who destroyed industrial machinery to protest against technology or technological advancements that threatened their livelihood. Do you want to add anything to that, Joe?
Yeah, so essentially they were developing early you could define it as computerized systems, so they were non-electronic, but it made the textiles require less people. You could get it done more automated. And so these machines were working faster, using other machines to make the progress work better. And so they really were threatened for their livelihood because you could reduce the number of people. Think about steel workers today. Think about how much technology goes overseas.
I mean, the kiosk at McDonald's.
Right, exactly. Yeah, going to McDonald's,
I get replaced by a machine.
Yeah, and so I
might have a problem with that.
Need someone at the counter to say this. Amazon always wanting to do their drone delivery, so you no longer need delivery people for stuff like that.
Yeah,
and so that would be equated to modern day technological advances. Back then, it was simply just better machines to make textiles. And so it was faster, it was more efficient, and you needed fewer people. And that pissed a lot of people off. And so that was the start of the Luddite movement.
Yeah. I think an interesting thing to think about is now if you put it into the modern context, you have things like artificial intelligence. We have an episode about that we kind of unpack, is it really truly AI? And then renewable energy. Renewable energy, I'm not a Luddite, okay? But the current tools, even electric vehicles are in this category, okay? But that's modern, electrical elements to this. But trying to think about things like renewable energy and the true sources that they are giant freaking time, energy sucks just to create. So, there's a show that my wife and I are watching recently that's called Landman. It's about oil and natural gas and just the drilling and rigging for that and what it takes. They're going to a wind farm and he unpacks how much it costs just to transport one of the blades of one tower, and how many man hours. It's like billions of dollars for one tower. So you have this.
Luddite.
you have this giant waste just because they're trying to pursue something that's renewable energy. I love the idea. Luddite. I don't mind that there's a pursuit for renewable energy. I do mind when it is counterproductive or hypocritical to be that. I'm only saying that because that's the truth. It is an exorbitant amount of something to do.
One thing to remember about the Luddite movement that continues to today is
I told you I might be one.
They will justify their views any way possible. So if someone says something that supports their views, they will gladly jump on that idea, even if there's no real factual basis to it, or if you look at the long run, it is more beneficial to society as whole. So one of the examples here, talking about these giant blades and how much it costs to move, well, how much did it cost to make those drilling platforms? We've already spent that, so they're free, right?
No.
And so, but did you take inflation into account for when those were originally placed 100 years ago to see how much that cost was back then, and transportation and everything? That's right. So this is the thing. This is exactly what the Luddites did, is they caused a lot of people to get angry about the new technology. Whether it was real or not, it didn't matter. They would raise up this idea. It's the same thing for, we talk about with cell phones, and how, cell phones, it's going to destroy our society. No one talks to each other anymore.
It's going to give you ear cancer.
It destroys communication. No, they were saying the same thing about the telephone. They said the same thing about the radio.
Right.
All of these excuses are the same thing that has been said since the Luddites in the 1800s.
I'm going to sit over here in my corner quietly, and Joe's going to finish this episode.
So yes, we do have a Luddite over here.
Okay.
Now, he will not go to the extent that the Luddites did.
Yeah, I'm not going to go break machinery or protest or anything like that. There are some things that make sense. I'm not against the idea of pursuing. I'm not against the idea of making that, as long as it becomes a production. But when the idea or sheer magnitude of something like that doesn't even amount to enough energy to do something different. So if it takes more energy than it will produce in its lifetime, it's not a good source.
But remember that when we're talking about even back in the textiles, it was a lot of changes to the entire textile industry. These were brand new machines that were coming in that were very costly. And so it was the exact same scenario as what we're dealing with now. This was a massive revolution in technology. It was a huge change. Even when electricity was first brought in, it was a massive, massive change in society. You can see some of the old pictures when they were first putting in the electrical lines. They're just all crossing over each other. It was a massive, invasion of the streets of all of these electrical lines going across to hit every home. Eventually, we got better and more efficient with it and actually put power poles. We buried some of them, and it got a lot better. But when the technology first comes around, it's extremely inefficient. And that is an excuse for Luddite people to be able to say, no technology, no of this, because it's inefficient. Inefficiency is part of the development process.
Yeah.
In order to get to a refined product. And that's the idea, is it has to be refined. You cannot refine something that is already perfect. It has to be in a rough form in order to refine it. And so new technology is always rough, and it slowly gets refined over time to become better. We're seeing that with AI. We're seeing that with self-driving cars. We're seeing that with a lot of the technologies that are coming out today. Think about even computers. Computers used to be, DOS-based, very inefficient, high energy draws, and didn't do much other than allowed you to do the same thing that you could do on a typewriter, Think about what the Luddites would have said then. They're saying, well, you've got this thing right here that all it does is allows you to write something. It takes a ton more power. It requires electricity. All of this coming in. Why use that when you've got your typewriter right here that you can just come over here? It doesn't require battery power. It's all mechanical. And you can just type away and you're done. Why have this? It's so inefficient. It does so much more than it needs to. It costs so much more.
Well, and it was not that size when they were negotiating. They were.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean,
the computer was like the size of our room.
I'm talking about PCs. So when the 286s first came out, when the Commodore 64s were out, those were much smaller. Those were the first personal computers.
Yeah.
And so they were much smaller. And you're saying, why, on a personal level, do you have that if you already have a typewriter? Well, you don't need this.
It's the conflict, like now more of a, like the anti-smartphone movement. So you're going back to like the flip phone and you're like, man, one text message and I'm going to get a smartphone again because I hated typing. I typed on those, like pushing 2 multiple times and then 7 multiple times. And, like it's just obnoxious.
And kids, we know you have no idea what we're talking about. This is old guy technology, so just be aware.
It was back in the 1900s. So.
Oh, gosh. It was.
Well, I think I think we talked about this before, but I think it was like the iPod that ultimately like launched into some of the more smartphone tech because that was the original iPod was a little like dial that handled a little LCD screen, and then it turned into an actual touch screen device.
Yeah, but why have an iPod? You've got your record player. You've got your
I got my collection
Walkman.
of songs.
You've got all these things.
I got my cassettes.
You don't. You've got your CDs. You've got your cassettes. You don't need this little thing that does.
I had a CD case stolen from my car once. I was just tragic. Like it was. I was lost. I didn't know what to do.
But you don't need this. I mean, and yet, what are we all doing now? Listening to our music on our smartphones.
And honestly,
CDs
I do not have
away
CDs. I do have vinyls because that's kind of cool. But now it's just
retro.
Cool. Yeah. Well, it's cool only in the sense that like I have vinyls that are signed from bands. So that's why I collect them. I do have a record player, but that's it's a totally different meaning than just going like, this is my collection and I like to sit here on my Sunday afternoons and play my favorite songs on my record player, on my whatever that, like, what was that, like the stereo phone or whatever it was, the big flute thing, whatever.
So yeah, Luddites have not gone away. Now the original Luddites were very aggressive, destroying textile machines and things like that.
Yes,
to try
we
to
haven't
protect their
gone
jobs.
away.
But Luddites still exist, and Luddites will always exist. There are those groups that always see the fear of new technology, and that's what the Luddites were. Now, are Luddites necessary? I think so.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think a positive element to it is sometimes the resistance can lead to a better design, like an ethical standard. If you're cutting corners to do something, it's a good thing. If there's more of a sustainability to it, that if you took this approach, it might be a harder road, but maybe that's part of the impact, is just being able to give more attention to those things before you jump on this design.
And having a redneck Luddite complaining about the blades for
why can't we just ride horses
wind
everywhere?
Energy,
because I'm allergic to them.
will the voices of these people will then help us to recognize that there are
who are you calling these people?
Redneck Luddites. I am hand waving to you, pointing out this is the person that I am talking about. Their voices will be enough to say, okay, maybe we do need to change some of these features to get it a little bit more cost effective, be more efficient, all those things. Where if we don't have that, I mean, if you're not a Luddite, you're just going to be accepting of technology. Be like, okay, cool. That's how much it is. That's what it does. Meh. And so having Luddites around, while annoying, can be beneficial for overall technological development and efficiency.
I resemble that.
Yes, you
the other element on the negative aspect is delayed progress in innovation, really hindering that potential to advance forward in certain elements. And sometimes those societal benefits are truly benefits that they're in the way of, I'm in the way of, apparently.
And always make fun of them for that, because that keeps them in their place.
Humility. That's the important part, is sometimes we need a dose of humility in order to stay humble. So, here's the thing, is like, electricity itself has faced skepticism, still continues to do so. And if you look at modern day pressures, I was trying to think of some of these, because I don't, in renewable energy, you talk about the windmills and things like that, but that's not necessarily electricity. You're trying to find alternative sources to generate electricity. So instead of coal mines, you have, or even like making the diversion of water be the reason why you have electricity in a particular area. That has been our pursuit for so long. Oil. I remember in Iraq, that's one of their main power plants runs on diesel fuel. Like, it's water tanks of diesel fuel. And that is all they do for the southern half of Iraq. That's how it's powered. So it runs on diesel fuel, crude oil. So, but to think of the modern context to now, you go, okay, well, electricity wise, what do we have? What are the things that we still struggle with Luddite sort of personalities? And I think that, like the development of particular software is one of them. Social media platform creation. Sometimes even just going like, okay, this new platform comes out. What does it have? What does it do? What kind of message does it have? What kind of censoring is it going to do? And so all of this, like, you still have the same kind of like against progress in this element. And then the other element is this pursuit of like cybersecurity, So even though it's really ingrained in and of itself with electricity, by the idea that a Luddite has isn't necessarily defined by just electricity. It's a Luddite is something that it might not be as efficient or effective as it could be, and maybe that's the protest. But also it might be something that you're like, this is hurting our kids, shut it down, Yeah. And so there are positives and negatives to being one. So
yeah, for sure. I think one of the big things is, when you were talking about, we're looking at ways to be better at producing electricity. There are a lot of ways to not have to use electricity at all. So they've got new building designs that allow you to heat and cool your home without ever using electricity. So you don't need a heater or an air conditioner, just because of the way that the design is, the way that it collects the heat from the sun. I don't know all the details, but it has, certain ducts and things that moves the heat through and all that requires no electricity at all. And those are the kinds of things that, Luddites are really good at, is coming together and saying, I don't like this. And then the non-Luddite saying, okay, well, what would you want instead? And coming to a consensus that becomes much more efficient and much more refined.
One of my favorite places that I lived at, not because of the conditions I lived in, but it had a boiler. And so we had radiant heat through the entire place, the whole apartment complex. And so anytime I wanted hot water, it was always hot water. I did not run out of hot water. and it was super duper hot. But that was kind of a cool experience, because when I needed heat, I just turned the heat valve on and it would start pushing hot water through the whole system. And all of a sudden, my place is boiling. I got to open windows because it's so hot. That's an effective means of doing that. And that's by usually a natural gas source and a lit flame. So by the time you're there, just the pressure alone is what's pushing that through the system. You're not needing any really additional electricity.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of different ways to look at it. But yeah, that's the Luddites. And so if you ever see someone that is anti-technology or complains about those cell phones or anything, just call them a Luddite.
No, appreciate them for helping change the world. Anyway, so here's some of the elements of this that I think we've dabbled in, but the environmental consequences of electricity. This area is one of those things. It's like, okay, how do we produce this? Like the way that our society produces electricity currently, like I want to look at China. China's one of the leading, I guess, pollutants in the sense of how they produce electricity is coal factories, coal refineries. So those coal factories are the way that they generate electricity in China, all over China. And even when they don't. There's no commitment for them to reduce their emissions. They're not concerned. They're actually opening more coal refineries. So it's unfortunate, but it's one of those ideas that we go, okay, well, what's another idea? Is it renewable alternatives? Like we talked about the windmills. My house, I went solar a little bit ago, although there's been an adjustment in the power grid somewhere, and my bill has gone up. For probably 2 years, I was paying a little bit, but usually it was because I paid like an average sum across the year, and that was before I built my solar, and so carried over the same process. But I was generating enough energy year round to where I was like $19 negative on my account every single month. So it was just consistently not having a bill.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. Something changed recently. I've been told that there's different regulations that shifted, and so I've got to have a conversation and be like, "Hey, I paid a lot for this." But at the same time, I think about it in the way that I use electricity. I use a lot of it in different aspects of my house, and I wanted to do something so that I'm not so much of a draw on the system. And you're smiling like that's just I ran after a fool's errand, but in a city slicker sort of mentality, I don't feel like installing a windmill in the back of my property is efficient, and and so what can I do? I'm a homeowner, and I decided to do that, and also it increases the value of my home in the long run. So I'm good. That's kind of the idea. But what is our pursuit? That are the consequences of trying to continue to develop electricity. We've done. So, natural gas is another one where, they utilize natural gas, though there's a plentiful source, it still requires the drilling for natural gas, the transportation, the refining, and then distribution too. So there's piping, all of that stuff goes into play. And all of that has some level of impact to us. We discussed this in a previous episode, but global warming, And although global warming has a giant we can inside joke, kind of gleefully laugh at it, it still has a realistic situation that we, can say and admit that there's still there's a possibility of our globe or our Earth being affected by the gases and the emissions that we currently emit in our world, but at the same time, if we just sit here and do nothing about it without thinking about it, it's just being ignorant and ignoring a problem that should be at least given the attention.
Yeah.
So
at the very least, anyone who doesn't see global warming as being caused by human activities, at the very least, we are not helping.
Yeah.
By continuing to use all of this stuff. And that's the big thing. I mean, electricity has done so much for all of our advancement, and yet a lot of times we don't think about the consequences of having that.
Right.
Now, renewable energies are great, but one of the other things is, here in the United States, just about everyone has electricity, unless you choose not to have electricity, but it's available to just about anyone. But you think about other places in the world, third world countries, have no access to electricity. And so the potential for those individuals to have the same access to what we talked about earlier, information, better medical care, better education, better access to news, all these great things, they don't have it. They're being left behind simply because we're using that electricity. And so it creates even greater of a disparity between those groups of individuals.
The closest thing I can identify with that is years ago we went on a camping trip, or not a camping, but it was to a cabin. And we drove to the cabin, got there, nicely parked, went inside, and there's no power to the cabin at all. Okay, but there's lights. There's a generator outside that we would turn on occasionally, but most of the time we were there, we wouldn't have power in the inside. There wasn't any backup batteries or anything like that. And really, really nice cabin, like real nice, decked out kitchen, all that kind of stuff. No fridge, obviously, but one of the interesting things was the cabin ran on a well, but the well had a pump. And without the electricity, you wouldn't have any water in the place. So it constantly was this fight. So let's say you wanted to take a hot shower because they had a nice shower in there. Well, you'd have to turn the generator on to warm up the water and then turn that on. Now, I believe if I remember correctly, it was one of the like electric water heaters that's just like instant. So it's like as you turn the water on, the water's coming in, but you still had to turn the generator on in order to warm up the water. Same thing with the kitchen sink. If you had to turn on the water at all, turn the water on at all, it wasn't city pressure. It was coming from a well with a pump attached to it. Without that generator on, that water was not coming out the faucet. And it was really weird how, like, for granted I had taken just that simple little process that, granted, there's enough water pressure in city water that it's coming in no matter what the power source is.
Right.
But on the end of that is a giant pump that is making sure electrically that water pressure exists.
Yeah.
So in a massive scale, that's the same process that I was dealing with inside of that cabin. But I can relate, like that's the first world problem that I can really relate in this. I understand that there's almost a desert of issues going on like that. So
yeah, but yeah, it's just one of those things where you've got to take that into account, that there are a lot of positives, but there's still a lot of negatives that come to electricity generation.
Yeah.
Fortunately, soon, hopefully, we'll have fusion power. They've made some great advancements on that. Man. And that'll be a lot easier to transport energy, to develop that energy, to get that out there.
Do you remember the movie? I can't remember the name of it, but it had, oh man, what is his name? Anyway, they're trying to like show a Russian community this cold fusion that they created, and it's like this thriller movie where he's trying to get through it. Anyway, like the whole idea is about this cold area, cold country, and these guys come in with cold fusion and show that, hey, like with this will heat, this little freaking thing will heat the entire city. And the whole city is like frozen, and they're like, yes, this is so cool. And it's a whole conspiracy to try to stop it from happening because, well, that would mean that all of these other producers of energy would be out of business by one little spark.
Yep.
And you think about like, okay, well, there you go. Now, like, imagine the other systems, becoming a Luddite because of cold fusion.
Yeah. No, and Luddites will always exist. But yeah, so it's, there are a lot of things to take into account. We love electricity. It allows us to do so many things, but there are a lot of negatives that come to that electricity. And hopefully as we continue with technological advances, we'll be able to find ways to do it better so that there are fewer environmental impacts, fewer human impacts. I mean, just even the health impacts from coal and natural gas and all those kinds of things is just, it's horrible, the kinds of things that happen to humans because of the electricity generation. But
I think also like, the leaps and bounds, like they're moving forward to smarter grid technology,
Yeah.
energy storage, and that's not buying a case of batteries from Costco. As much as you think that is energy storage, it's not. Those are flashlights and toy things. So, individual actions of, are an element though that you can do. I like I mentioned, I went solar at my house. I always get the phone call about, do you have a backup battery? And I'm like, oh man, like you guys, what's after the battery?
Well, the backup battery is great now because they're paying you less for the electricity that you put back into the system. So now you can keep some of that electricity for yourself.
It's true. It's the price of the battery.
And no, we're not sponsored by any solar or backup batteries.
If it became the fact that because I'm one of the few in my neighborhood who has solar, that they gave me a battery because of it, then that'd be great. But everyone else, they have to do the first step. So I'm just the target now because I actually have solar. So they look and they go, would you like a battery? And I'm like, ugh, stop.
See, here's the Luddite contradiction. We've got a full-on Luddite here, yet he put solar panels on his house.
I did because I didn't want to be that much of a draw on the system.
There you go.
All right, quick pause. Hit that pause button. No, don't hit the pause button. Don't. Are you ready to take charge of your financial future? Join our Financial Empowerment Membership, a community where we empower you with tools, insights, and strategies to regain control of your money. Whether you're just starting or looking to optimize your finances, we've got you covered. So check out the link in the show notes and sign up today to take the first step toward financial freedom. And back to the show. So, I think a little bit, this is probably some of the highlights. This is the highlight reel about electricity. There's a lot of really cool things that electricity enables us to do. But I think probably one of the most beneficial is that you don't have to hold somebody down while you saw through their leg with a piece of metal anymore. They don't do that anymore. They knock them out, they put them under, they have a device that's electronically run or battery run, that monitors all of their condition while they're unconscious, make sure they get enough gas or whatever it is, continue to do that at microscopic levels to where, it's perfect, everything. And then they go in with lasers and remove everything. And you're like, all of that is electricity. It is fascinating. And the development of healthcare, electric-powered medical everything, from the invention of X-ray, you'd think just going back to the invention of an X-ray, and you're like, holy cow, that isn't possible without electricity.
A pacemaker. Pacemakers help save a lot of lives. I don't know the numbers, but I would put it at least in the thousands.
Yeah.
If not tens and hundreds of thousands. And it's a little pacemaker. It just keeps your heart beating the way it's supposed to.
Yep.
And that uses electricity.
Yep. MRIs, ventilators, keep you breathing. That's a very, very small list of the advancements in medical care that is attributed because of electricity and what electricity can do. Hospitals rely on electricity just to keep the lights on. I was watching another show, the show you recommended a while back, The Rookie. Mm-hmm. And there's a character that takes a hospital hostage. Terrible, really sad episode. Okay. Really terrible.
Yeah.
But in the situation, the guy just wants to save his wife, and so he takes the hospital hostage and hacks into the whole system, shuts them down from prescription regulation, shuts their computer systems down so they have no access to the files, then kills the power of the hospital. And they're like, look, somebody's going to die. Well, that's what happened is, kills the power and a ventilator shuts off on somebody. And, it's a sad situation where I was infuriated in this episode. I was like, how careless of a person could you be that you think you justify the concern you have for this? It's just, anyway, I was really angry in that episode.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's all of those things, like from the medical records to the access to the doctor files to the prescriptions to the power, and even in the sense of if the power goes out, there's emergency generators because they need it, and so it's. And then even advancing even further after, I think the pandemic kind of thrust us into this, but it was a necessary thing because there's been so much resistance against the idea of telemed. The concept of telemed and going like, but is that HIPAA compliant? Or you're like, if you have it over a screen, is there somebody who could tap in and do that? You're like, if I'm worried about that and less about the care of that person, then I would rather do everything I possibly can to get to care for somebody else rather than find a reason why it shouldn't happen.
Right.
And that might not make me a Luddite at that point because I want that to go there.
He's only part Luddite.
I said a little. Okay. I have not embraced the entirety of Luddite. But the idea is to really make healthcare accessible across the board. Now, I'm not saying that like the electrical poverty doesn't exist where these aren't even options in those areas. Yeah. That is absolutely the truth. But in our first world like environment, there are so many things that have been revolutionary in what they do, and it's incredible. So, like I want to think about like just a defibrillator, okay? Using the actual electrical element that it produces. Just, hey, I'm going to produce electricity on these two ends. And the only reason why it exists is to make sure you're back alive, and you're bringing mostly alive, back to where your body has a pulse. Yes, it does.
No,
a defibrillator shocks your heart back to beating.
Nope.
Yes, it does.
Nope.
What does it do?
It shocks it from a one rhythm back to normal rhythm.
Okay.
So
all right.
It's fibrillating, which is why it's called a defibrillator.
Right.
And so your heart is beating. It's just beating too fast, irregularly, whatever the case is. And so you shock it, and that brings it back to a normal rhythm. The only way to bring someone back when they don't have a pulse is, Dr. Mike, this is for you, chest compressions, chest compressions, chest compressions. That's it. Defibrillators, as much as they show this in TV, do not bring back an unbeating heart. The heart has to be beating for a defibrillator to work.
That's really annoying because, like, I'm going to go to TV because of this. But, like, not the paddles, but, like, the little, like, spatulas that when they're open heart surgery, they're, like, clear, and they're, like, right on a stopped heart, not fibrillating. And you're like, this shows the heart not beating, not doing anything. It's just sitting there, and then they have the paddles, and it, like, they're clear, and then all of a sudden the heart's like, okay, all right, let's do this again.
That's not how it works.
That's disappointing. Stupid Hollywood.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. You've got to do the chest compressions in order to get the heart going again.
Either way, the defibrillator is pretty cool.
Yeah, it still saves lives. I'm not saying it doesn't save lives because the non-rhythmic heart can kill someone. So you want to make sure it's proper and all that. That's what the defibrillator does.
I thought this part was really cool, only in the sense that, like, there's ongoing research in electric power biotechnology. And biotechnology is something that Joe has a special place in his heart for. Like, there's obviously, like, there's things that make the news. There's stories about individuals. I've seen the thing that Musk has. I can't remember what it's like. I want to call it the V chip, but that's the South Park episode where it stops him from swearing and shocks his brain. Hilarious, but not what we're talking about. Like, this is a Neuralink. Yeah. Neuralink. So it's a brain link that they have that they've connected.
Yeah, it's a BCI.
And what they've shown a video recently of the second patient for that's playing a first person shooter video game. And it literally, he's using his eyes, seeing a target and shooting at that target. And it's so fast that the people playing against him can't keep up with how fast he's able to take him out. And so because the link is responding, and that's all it is his eyes looking and brain going, I got to shoot at that target, and it's responding. That is insane. Insane.
Yeah. So that's what's known as an invasive BCI.
Okay.
The BCIs that I work with are external BCIs.
Right.
And so it's a lot less invasive, and the technology is actually already there.
Yeah.
If you want to see something really cool, we may link it in the video, but if you want to see something really cool, look at Emotiv, EMOTIV, and there's a really cool video on YouTube where someone uses an Emotiv headset to control a BB-8 toy. So it's a little bit older of a video, but check that out. It's really cool stuff. The brain-computer interfaces, electric prosthetics that allow you to use brain function to be able to control a prosthetic.
Yeah.
Now, an external BCI doesn't allow the feedback of the information. That's where an invasive BCI, which is directly tied to the brain, can allow that feedback to come back. So if you touch something with a prosthetic, it potentially would allow you to then actually feel that. Whereas with an external BCI, an electronic prosthetic, it won't give you feedback. You won't feel that when you touch something. But I mean, this is massively cool technology that electricity allows.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just really amazing what electricity can allow us to do.
You know, I've been to the theme park locally that we have. It's called Lagoon, and up there they have this old village that is all these old cabins, and back in the 1800s, actually when Lagoon was first formed there, it was the reason why it was called Lagoon is because it was a waterway. It was like a little blue lagoon sort of thing.
It was a lagoon.
Okay? It was a lagoon. But they had this village that talks about kind of the history of the area and the city. And one of them is the little hospital medical facility. And it has all of these tools, all these things that you're like, all of it looks like torture devices. I'd never want any of it. And most of it's rusted at this point. So you're like, ugh. But there's actually one of the locations is like a whole like glass encased element of like, why can't I think of the name of the medicine shops back in the day? Not
apothecaries.
Apothecary. So it's like all these vials, all these different things, and tools for surgical things. It's pretty fascinating, but it's terrifying to think that like that was our world without electricity.
Yeah.
You know, so to think that now, you know, that scalpel is a laser, you know, is pretty impressive. It's really cool. That being said, you know, like it's still, you know, I think that they did their best they could with what they had, you know, and so I really want to be grateful for the idea, the advancements of electricity, because it has truly transformed every element of our life.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be really cool. But we got to pull the plug on our episode for today. These electricity puns are terrible, aren't they?
Yes, they are awful.
How about a quick recap? Electricity revolutionized communication and technology, making our world smaller and smarter. But it's not all bright. Its production has left us with significant environmental challenges we're still grappling with. And finally, it transformed healthcare, saving countless lives and pushing the boundaries of what's absolutely possible. So let's think about this as kind of the takeaway. How do we continue to innovate with electricity while being mindful of its impact? So next time you flip a switch or charge your phone or, you know, turn on the television, remember the global web of connections, the challenges and opportunities behind that simple action. So what do you think might be one way you rely on electricity that you hadn't really considered before? Do you use an electronic toothbrush? You know? Do you mindlessly scroll while you're going to the bathroom? I'm pretty sure you recognize that. Oh, do you have an alarm clock? Oh, weird. If it's not the one that goes ding a ding a ding a ding a ding a ding ding ding, it's electrical. How can you contribute to a more sustainable future for your daily life? And honestly, like, I don't know how. I can't even answer that for you. It's definitely... Huh?
Solar's a good option.
There you go. Yeah. Hey, that was a compliment, I think.
I give them out every now and then.
All right. Time for Jokes with Joe.
All right. Here we go. What do you call a funny mountain?
I don't know.
Hilarious.
That is definitely not funny at all.
Oh, that one's great.
Hilarious.
It's hilarious.
Pretty sure the puns in this were a little bit stronger.
No.
All right. Hey, guys, just a preview real quick. In the coming episodes, we plan to do a sort of what if series where we're going to look at how dependent we have become on electricity and what if we didn't have it, or worse, it suddenly disappeared. So tune in to see how we unplug some of the things we use every single day. We've reached the end of our show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment. Life's too short. So keep laughing and learning. And remember, idiots have way more fun.
Check your shoes.